Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I'm a member from Big Cartel's support team. And I am joined today by Jericho from TaxJar. And we are going to talk a little bit about tax basics and just to kind of help you dip your toes into the whole world of tax. So welcome, Jericho. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks.
First of all, I just wanted to kind of talk about who is TaxJar, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So TaxJar, we are focused on solving the headache of sales tax. That is what we do. We're a technology company, and our sole purpose and mission is to relieve those problems and those complex headaches that sales tax creates. So that's what we do.
All right, thank you so much. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what is sales tax and the difference between income tax and sales tax. And do I, as a person who has an online shop selling goods or services, do I have to collect sales tax?
Yeah, so sales tax is a pass-through tax. Basically, when a state seems that you have to collect and remit sales tax in their state, and we'll talk about the kind of different reasons why. It's a tax that lies on the buyer. So it's never like an income tax or anything that comes out of the pocket of the seller. Sales tax is really a pass-through tax, meaning that although the seller will collect the sales tax, it's ultimately going to end up going to the state. So it's a pass-through tax. So the liability never lands on the seller. So we'll go over a couple of reasons why a state would say you need to collect and remit sales tax. And then we'll also kind of talk about some marketplace facilitator laws, which is another kind of piece to that puzzle.
For sure. So when does a shop need to comply with sales tax laws?
Yeah, so if you have sales tax nexus in a state, which we'll kind of dig into, that's basically the law that will say you have a presence in our state, and we expect that because you're doing business in our state, you will be collecting sales tax and remitting it to us, registering, collecting, and remitting to us based, on the specific laws that each state has put into place. So that's sales tax nexus.
Okay, and we will dig into what nexus means here when we go into some key terms. So just kind of talking about it peripherally. So to talk about, we've heard a few words already, like what is a marketplace facilitator, and then what is really changing in regards to sales tax in like the e-commerce world by selling or buying online.
Yeah, so along with economic and physical nexus, there are new laws passing in certain states, marketplace facilitator laws. And these laws are basically giving states the right to collect sales tax directly from large platforms. And what this does for the state is it facilitates just a faster, cleaner way to collect the sales tax from the large platforms. And it takes the kind of the collecting and remitting off of the seller's plates, and it kind of puts that onto the platforms, into their court, if you will. So what changes really is, as a seller, when I'm on a platform, a large platform that has marketplace facilitator laws in a state, I no longer have to calculate, collect, remit the sales tax. That is all done and taken care of on the platform level. So it kind of just takes that off my plate. That's kind of what marketplace facilitator laws are.
That's so nice. So it's not necessarily something that you have to be, doing your own math for every single transaction. This is something that TaxJar is helping out with Big Cartel shops.
Right.
All right. So I thought let's jump into some of those key terms that we talked about. Some of those words were new to me. So I thought we could jump into nexus and starting off physical nexus.
Yeah, so physical nexus is basically the most common way that you that a state will determine that you need to collect and remit sales tax in their state. And physical nexus happens when you have a warehouse, an employee, an affiliate in that state. So the state will look at that and say, okay, you're clearly doing business in our state. That creates, nexus. You now have to register and remit, collect and remit sales tax in our state. And that's been around for ages. That's the most typical way you establish nexus in a state.
Okay, so moving on to economic nexus. This one's a little more esoteric, so maybe you can explain that.
And this is much newer. So states were noticing, okay, even though a business may not have a physical presence here, we're noticing that they're still doing quite a bit of business, e-commerce into our state. And we've passed laws now that say, based on that, if you cross a certain threshold, we will say that you need to register, collect, and remit sales tax. And that's what economic nexus is. And that gets pretty complex because each state sets their own thresholds, either revenue or number of transactions. So that can get that can become its own headache, is trying to figure out where you have nexus, in what states, have you crossed these thresholds, what your sales are, how many number of transactions. So this is another piece that can get kind of complicated, and that's where TaxJar can kind of help out there.
Well, and we're so grateful for you to figure out all those different permutations about what could be considered an economic nexus or not. So thanks for explaining that one. Sure. Kind of moving on to product taxability and also shipping. Can we talk a little bit about what tax is for these and how it relates to them? Yeah, definitely. Because as if it weren't complex enough already, states also have different laws depending on what it is that you sell. So that's where product taxability comes into play. So certain types of products can be taxed at a different rate or not at all. And each state has their own laws around that. So TaxJar can really help you identify what you're selling, how is it taxed, and where is it treated differently. And the same thing will kind of go with shipping. Certain states include shipping, certain states don't. Certain states will include it if certain conditions are met. So again, those are two pieces that kind of get a little complicated that TaxJar can help you identify and clear those out. And that's great. Again, all of these, different details and variations and exceptions. So it's nice to know, our shops can put in, their home state information. Their shoppers can put in their shipping information, and along with, again, all of that mixed together, and then TaxJar is able to tax sales tax properly. So let's move on. These are words that were totally new to me, but I was hoping you could talk a little bit about destination and origin sourcing, and then multi-channel obligations. Yeah, so another complication the states put out is that it's not always just laid out like the tax rate will be applied to where you ship, where your buyer lives. It depends on what state you're selling in and their destination or origin sourcing, meaning that sometimes you're taxing at the rate of where your buyer is located, and sometimes you're taxing at the rate where you and your business are located. So this is something that goes over a lot of sellers' heads as well. And you definitely want to be, dialed in with how you should be taxing and what the origin and destination sourcing laws, how that applies to your transactions, each transaction. And the more states you're selling into, the more complex that gets. So that's also something to be aware of. And then on top of that, if you're selling on multiple channels, if you're selling on Big Cartel and also Amazon and also Shopify, and you have your own website, this creates, multi-channel obligations, meaning that if, you're collecting on one, you're collecting on all of them. So the whole world of sales tax can get quite complex, which is, what we're here to help solve. Absolutely. And so just to clarify, just because you're collecting tax through your Big Cartel shop, that doesn't mean you're covered if you have in-person sales or if you're selling on another platform. So we always defer to talking to a tax professional that can help you with all of those different channels you might be selling in. But the good news is if you are selling with a Big Cartel shop, we've got you covered for your sales through Big Cartel, right? Right. Okay. So finally, I'd like to talk just a little bit about tax codes and how TaxJar uses those when calculating sales tax. And maybe you can just talk briefly about that. Yeah, definitely. So tax codes are how we identify your products, right? So for example, if you are selling clothing, we have specific tax codes that will identify what your product is, so that when we see, okay, you're selling your clothing in New York, it's being shipped here, we take all of that information and we kind of spit out the correct rate for that transaction. So if it's, shipping to an address in New York where it's a reduced rate, or if you're sending it to California,
We're going to take all of those pieces of information, where you're shipping, what are you selling, what are the destination versus origin laws, and we're going to give you the correct tax rate based on all that information you give us. Without those product tax codes, we will just always treat everything as fully taxable. So that's what that piece is very important if you have a product that, you know, can be considered reduced or exempt in certain states. So we're going to make sure that we're treating your products the way that the states say, you know, they should be taxed based on the product tax codes. That's why they're so important.
All right. So tax codes are definitely something a shop would want to dig into if they feel their products are exempt or can be reduced in some way. So a good place to dig in. All right. Well, gosh, I think we covered a lot in just about 10 minutes. So Jericho, I just want to thank you. But, you know, we just barely scratched the surface with tax. So if any questions come up, please feel free to reach out to us by either starting a conversation from your shop's admin. You can reach out to us at support@bigcartel.com, or you can also check out this helpful Marketplace Facilitator tax link on our help site. But Jericho, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate your expertise.
My pleasure.
Thanks.